My ex-wife arrived on my porch at sunrise, set down her leather bag, looked me dead in the eyes, and said the words that stopped my heart cold. "Gideon, your father sent me here." My name is Gideon Marsh, 24 years old, a struggling rancher in Montana Territory, and the woman standing on my porch was Josephine, my Josie, the wife I married for love, the wife who packed her bags after every fight and ran back to her father's house, the wife who left me for good 11 months ago, after one terrible misunderstanding neither of us had the courage to fix. We were madly in love, but we fought like cat and rat. Our parents warned us we were too young, that marriage was more than what boyfriend and girlfriend do, but we didn't listen. We thought love alone was enough. Now here she stood on my porch in the golden morning light, more beautiful than the day I lost her, sent to me by the one man too weak to leave his own bed, my dying father. But why would my father send my ex-wife back to my porch after everything that tore us apart? What did he tell Josie that made her travel 200 dusty miles to face the husband she swore she'd never see again? And what secret was my father carrying that he refused to die with? Stay with me until the very end, because what my ex-wife pulled out of that leather bag on my porch didn't just change my life. It changed everything I thought I knew about love, about marriage, and about my father. I dropped the fence rail I was carrying. It hit the dirt with a thud I felt in my chest. For 11 months, I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. In my dreams, I always knew what to say. Standing there in the real morning, with real dust on my boots and my real heart pounding like a runaway horse, I couldn't say anything at all. Josie looked thinner, tired around the eyes. Her dark hair had come loose from its braid on the long road, and the hem of her cream dress was brown with trail dust. She had traveled 200 miles, alone, to stand on the porch of a man she had every reason to hate. "Your father sent me," she said again, softer this time, like she needed to hear it herself to believe it. "He wrote to me, Gideon, 3 letters. I burned the first 2. I finally found my voice, and I'm ashamed of what it did with it." "Then why didn't you burn the 3rd? Her chin lifted. There it was, that fire. The same fire I fell in love with at the church picnic in Hollis Springs, when we were barely more than children. The same fire that used to send her slamming out my door with a carpet bag in her hand. "Because the 3rd one wasn't from your father's hand," she said. "It was written by the doctor. Your father is dying, Gideon. And you didn't even tell me." The wind moved through the dry grass. Somewhere behind the barn, a crow called out, ugly and lonely. "You're not my wife anymore," I said. "A man doesn't send word of his troubles to a woman who left." "A woman who left?" Her voice cracked like a whip. "Is that the story you tell yourself at night? That I left?" And just like that, we were back in it. Cat and rat. 11 months apart, and we found our old fight in under 2 minutes. Like a pair of boots waiting by the door. But here's the thing nobody tells you about fighting with the person you love. Underneath every shout is a question you're too scared to ask out loud. Underneath her anger was, "Why didn't you come after me?" Underneath mine was, "Why wasn't I enough to make you stay?" We didn't ask those questions. We never had. That was the whole problem with us. We knew how to love loud and fight loud, but we never learned how to talk quiet. Josie picked up her leather bag. For one terrible second, I thought she was going to turn around and walk right back down that dusty road, and I felt my whole body lean toward her, like a barn about to fall over. Instead, she walked past me, through my front door, into my house. "Where do you think you're going?" I called after her. "To see Amos," she said without turning around. I didn't ride 200 miles to argue with his fool son on a porch. And Lord help me, I followed her, like I always did. Let me tell you about my father, Amos Marsh, so you understand what happened next. My father was the strongest man I ever knew. He built this ranch with 2 hands and a stubborn streak wide as the Missouri River. When my mother died birthing me, folks in town said he'd sell the land and drink himself into the ground. Instead, he raised a son alone, never missed a Sunday service, and never once spoke a cruel word about the God who took his wife. But the fever that came for him last winter didn't care how strong he was. By spring, he couldn't ride. By summer, he couldn't stand. Now he lay in the back bedroom of my house, thin as a fence wire, waiting on the Lord's own schedule. And he loved Josie. That's the part that made everything harder. From the first day I brought her home, he loved her like the daughter he never had. When she'd run off to her father's house after our fights, it was Amos who'd sit on the porch with me and say, "Son, go get her." And it was my pride that always answered, "She left. She can come back on her own." When our marriage finally broke for good, I think it broke something in him too. Josie pushed open the bedroom door, and I watched her face when she saw him. She had known Amos Marsh as a mountain of a man who could throw a hay bale over a wagon with one arm. What lay in that bed was a shadow. Gray skin, sunken cheeks, hands that trembled on top of the quilt like autumn leaves. Josie made a sound, half gasp, half sob, and dropped to her knees beside his bed. She took his trembling hand in both of hers and pressed it to her cheek. "Papa Amos," she whispered. She had always called him that. "I came. I'm here." My father's eyes opened slow, like curtains being drawn, and when he saw her face, I watched 10 years fall off him in a single heartbeat. He smiled, a real smile, the first one I'd seen in months. "Josie girl," he rasped, "you got my letter." "Oh, I got 3 of them, you stubborn old goat." He laughed. It turned into a cough, deep and wet and frightening, and Josie held his hand through all of it. When it passed, he looked at her, then at me, standing useless in the doorway, then back at her. "Good," he said. "Both of you, in one room. Took me dying to manage it." "Pa," I started. "Hush, boy." His voice was thin, but it still carried the iron it had when I was 8 years old and caught stealing sugar. "I've got words to say, and not many days left to say them in. So the 2 of you are going to stand there and listen." The room went still. Outside, I could hear the windmill turning, slow and creaking, and the far-off bawl of a calf looking for its mother. My father took the deepest breath his broken lungs would allow. "Josie," he said, "tell my son why you really left. Not the fight, not the shouting, the real reason, the one you told me in your letters and swore me to secrecy on." I felt the floor tilt under my boots. Letters? Josie had been writing to my father? Josie's face went white as fresh milk. "Papa Amos, you promised?" "I'm dying, girl. Dying men get to break one promise." His eyes found mine, and there was something in them I had never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, guilt. "And when she's done," my father whispered, "I've got a confession of my own. About that day in town, about the seamstress, about the lie that ended your marriage, son." He closed his eyes, gathering strength. "Because it wasn't a misunderstanding. Somebody told Josie a lie on purpose. And God forgive me, I know who did it." The candle on my father's nightstand flickered, and for a long moment, nobody in that room moved. Josie's hand was still wrapped around his, but her eyes had dropped to the quilt. To some spot on the fabric, she seemed to be studying, like it held the answers to everything. "Josie," my father said again, gentler now, "tell him." I stood in that doorway, feeling like a stranger in my own house. My wife, my ex-wife, had been writing letters to my father. Secret letters. For how long? Since she left? Before that? "It doesn't matter anymore," Josie whispered. "It matters to him," Amos rasped, nodding toward me with what little strength he had. "Look at that boy's face. He's been carrying a wound for 11 months, thinking he knows what tore you 2 apart. He doesn't know the half of it." My chest went tight. "Josie, please." She lifted her eyes to mine, and I saw something there I had never once seen in 3 years of marriage. Not anger, not the fire I was used to. Shame. "Do you remember the winter after we married?" she said quietly. "The fever that went through Hollis Springs? I caught it too, Gideon. Bad. Doc Whitfield had to sit with me 3 nights running. I remembered sitting outside that sickroom door, praying to a God I wasn't sure was listening, begging him to let her live." "You never told me what he said afterward," Josie went on, her voice shaking now. "You were so relieved I lived, you never asked what the fever left behind." "Josie, I can't give you children, Gideon." The words fell into that small room like stones into a still pond, and everything rippled outward from them. Doc Whitfield told me quiet, so you wouldn't hear it and worry while I was still weak. He said the fever settled somewhere it shouldn't have. He said I'd likely never carry a baby to term. Her voice broke clean in half. You used to talk about our children, Gideon. Remember? Sons to help you run cattle. A daughter with my mother's eyes. You said it with such joy in your face. And every time you said it, it felt like a knife going into me. Because I knew, and I never told you. I couldn't breathe right. That's not, Josie, that wouldn't have changed one thing about how I loved you. You don't know that, she cried, and now the tears came, hot and fast. You say that now, sitting here, but I watched you dream about a family every single night, and I couldn't bear to be the one who took that dream away from you. So when we fought, when you were in town with Adeline Pruitt, and I saw you standing so close, her hands on your arm, laughing together, some ugly, broken part of me thought, good, let him go. Let him find a woman who can give him what I can't. She pressed her free hand over her mouth, like she could push the confession back inside. I didn't leave because of one misunderstanding in town, Gideon. I left because I believed, in my heart, that I was failing you. And I was too much of a coward to say it to your face, so I let you believe I left because I was angry. Angry was easier than broken. The room was silent, except for my father's ragged breathing, and the wind outside rattling the shutters. I crossed the floor in 3 steps, and knelt down beside her, taking both her hands in mine, the way I should have done 100 times before, and never did. Josie, look at me. She wouldn't. Josie, look at me. She did, finally, her whole face wet and trembling. I didn't marry you for children, I said. I married you because when you laughed, the whole ranch felt less lonely. I married you because you're the only person who ever made me feel like a man worth something. Not because of what I owned, or what I could give you, but just because of who I was. You hear me? Children or none. That was never the deal I made with my heart. Her shoulders shook, and she folded forward into my chest, and I held on to her the way a drowning man holds a rope. And for one long, aching moment, neither one of us said a word. We just held on. Then, from the bed, my father cleared his throat, as much as his ruined lungs would allow. That's half the truth in this room, he said. Now it's my turn, and mine's the uglier half. We both turned to him. You said you saw him with Adeline Pruitt, my father said to Josie, standing close, laughing, her hands on his arm. I saw what I saw, Josie said, some of the old fire returning to her voice. You saw what somebody wanted you to see, my father said. And you were told a lie to go along with it. Somebody stood right next to you outside that dress shop and told you my son was courting Adeline Pruitt behind your back. Told you he'd been seen buying her ribbons and fine cloth. Am I right? Josie went very still. How could you possibly know that? My father's eyes closed, like the weight of what he was about to say was too heavy to carry with his eyes open. Because the man who told you that lie, he said, came to me first, bragging on it. Thinking I'd be pleased. Who? I heard my own voice come out low and dangerous, a voice I didn't know I had. My father opened his eyes, and they were wet. Your own father. Josie, he said. Harlan Vance told you that lie himself. And I knew it the moment you two split apart. And I said nothing, because I told myself it wasn't my business to interfere between a man and his daughter. Josie went white as bone. My father wouldn't. He would. And he did, Amos said, because he never once believed this ranch could keep you fed. He wanted you married to Silas Whitcomb from the bank, and you know it. Your father saw Gideon in that dress shop buying back your late mother's wedding gown, restoring it, mind you, as an anniversary gift for you, and he twisted it into something ugly and fed it to you before you ever had the chance to hear the truth. The wedding gown, my anniversary gift, the thing I'd been too proud, too stubborn, too scared to simply explain when Josie confronted me in a fury 11 months ago, because some foolish part of me thought a surprise, ruined by explanation, wasn't worth giving at all. I felt sick, genuinely sick, in a way I hadn't felt since the day she left. All this time, Josie whispered, I thought I left because of what I saw, but I left because of a lie my own father told me. on top of a truth about myself I was too ashamed to share. And I let you go, I said, because I was too proud to explain address. My father, dying in that bed, looked at the both of us with more life in his eyes than I'd seen in months. Now you know, he said. All of it. The lie, the shame, the pride, every rotten brick in the wall you two built between yourselves. And I am asking you both, with whatever days the good Lord sees fit to leave me, to tear that wall down before I go. He reached toward the nightstand drawer with a trembling hand. Because there's one more thing in this room neither of you know about yet, he said, and it's in that drawer, and it changes everything. My father's trembling hand pulled open that nightstand drawer, and what came out wasn't paper first. It was cloth. Soft, cream-colored, wrapped careful in brown paper like something holy. I knew that cloth. My hands had touched it once, in Adeline Pruitt's shop, running my thumb along stitching that used to belong to Josie's mother. The dress, Josie whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Adeline finished it 2 weeks after you left, my father said, unwrapping it slow, his fingers shaking but careful, like a man handling a newborn. Gideon never got the chance to give it to you, so Adeline brought it here instead, and I told her to leave it with me. I couldn't bear to let a gift built from that much love just sit in a shop, forgotten. Josie reached out and touched the lace at the collar, the same lace her mother wore the day she married Harlan Vance 30 years before. Tears ran freely down her face now, but they weren't the tears from before. These were different, softer. You kept it safe, she said. All this time. I kept a lot of things safe, my father said, including a letter I wrote your father 3 months ago. Josie's head snapped up. You wrote to my father? I told him what I suspected, that he'd twisted the truth about that dress shop and driven a wedge between two people who loved each other plain and true. I told him a dying man doesn't have patience for pride, his or anyone else's, and that if he had 1 ounce of decency left in him, he'd make it right before I closed my eyes for good. The room went quiet except for the wind outside, and then, soft, hesitant, a knock at the front door. I felt Josie stiffen beside me. She knew that knock, 20 years of knowing it. He's out there, my father said. Been sitting in his wagon at the end of the lane for near on an hour, too ashamed to come up the path. Go on, boy. Let the man in. I walked to that door with my heart hammering harder than it had all morning, and when I opened it, Harlan Vance stood there with his hat in his hands, looking nothing like the proud, sharp-tongued man who'd once told me his daughter deserved better than a dirt-poor rancher. He looked old. He looked sorry. Is she here? He asked. Is Josephine here? I stepped aside, and he walked past me into the house like a man walking toward his own sentencing. When Josie saw him standing in that bedroom doorway, she went rigid, the dress still clutched in her arms. Josie girl, Harlan started, his voice cracking on the second word. You told me a lie, she said. You stood outside that shop, and you told me my husband was courting another woman, and I believed you. I left my marriage because of you. I know it, Harlan said, and to my shock, the proud man's eyes filled with tears. I wanted you back under my roof. I wanted you married to a man with money enough to keep you comfortable your whole life. And I told myself that made it right to bend the truth a little. But there's no bending truth, Josie. There's only breaking it, and I broke something in you and this boy that I had no right to touch. He looked at me then, and for the first time in 3 years, Harlan Vance looked at me like a man, not like a disappointment. I'm sorry, son, he said, truly sorry. I judged you for what you didn't have, and I never once looked at what you did have. A heart that loved my daughter plainer and truer than any banker ever could. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded, and something eased in my chest that had been tight for 11 long months. Josie crossed the room slow and put her arms around her father's neck, and he held her like he was the one who'd been lost and just found his way home. My father watched all of this from his pillow with the widest smile I'd seen on his face in a year. Well, he said, his voice thin as smoke, but somehow lighter than it had been all morning. Feels like my work here is done. Don't you dare talk like that, Josie said fiercely, turning back to him. You're not finished yet. "Old man, you've got a wedding to see." My father raised one gray eyebrow. "A wedding?" I looked at Josie. Josie looked at me. And for the first time since she'd stood on my porch at sunrise with that leather bag in her hand, I saw something in her eyes I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. "Marry me again, Josie," I said, right there in that little sick room, with her father wiping his eyes in the corner, and mine propped up on his pillows, like a king watching his kingdom finally set right. "Not because my father sent you, not because of any letter, or any lie, or any dress. Marry me because I choose you. Every cat and rat fight, every hard winter, children or none, for the rest of whatever life the Lord sees fit to give us." She didn't answer with words. She answered by pressing that restored wedding gown against her chest, tears streaming, laughing and crying all at once, and nodding so hard I thought her whole body might shake apart with joy. 3 weeks later, we stood on that same porch where she'd once set down her bag and broken my whole world open, and we said our vows again in front of the whole town of Hollis Springs. Josie wore her mother's dress, finished stitch by careful stitch, by Adeline Pruitt's own hands. My father sat in a chair someone had carried out special, wrapped in quilts despite the warm spring sun, and though the fever never fully left his body, something about that day breathed new life into him that no doctor could explain. He lived to see 2 more harvests after that, long enough to hold his first grandchild, because, against every doctor's grim prediction, love has a way of making room for miracles nobody dared promise. Harlan Vance walked his daughter down that porch step himself, and when he handed her hand to mine, he gripped my shoulder like a father should have done from the very start. And me, I learned the hardest lesson a young husband can learn. That love isn't enough on its own. Love needs truth sitting right beside it, or it starts rotting from the inside, quiet as termites in an old barn beam. Josie and I still fight sometimes. We're still cat and rat some evenings. But now, when the fighting's done, we sit on that porch together and we talk quiet instead of running. So let me ask you something before you go, because I think it matters more than anything else in this whole story. Is there a truth you've been too afraid to say to someone you love? A truth sitting quiet in your chest, waiting for the courage to come out, before it's too late to say it at all? If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me to tell it, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, so you never miss the next story that reminds you what love is really made of.